You know how lots of people grow up and they know they're part something, but they don't know anything about it? And I sort of feel like for the kids, I don't really know how.
I think that if you want to retain your culture, you got to get involved in community, in the church.
Yeah, but I'm not into that. I'm not into church.
Because they can't speak fluent the language. But if you take them to church, they hear from there.
But I feel like that I'm never going to do that.
I'm Sarai.
And I'm Julie.
This year, we travelled with our soundie Joey across Aotearoa to eavesdrop on immigrant whānau talking with their children.
Every family we visited welcomed us, made us laugh, honestly made us cry. And over this series, we invite you too to listen in on Conversations with My Immigrant Parents. In this episode of Conversations with My Immigrant Parents, we are in Tūranganui-a-Kiwa, Gisborne, to hear from Liliani and her daughter Kesaia. Liliani's in her 60s now. She left Tonga at 21 and came to Aotearoa with her auntie in the 1970s.
Liliani met Kesaia's pālangi dad in Auckland, and from there they married and moved to Gisborne.
Kesaia describes her mum's early life here as being difficult. She was married to a white man in a small town in New Zealand where there were less than 10 Pacific Islanders.
Liliani worked as an early childhood education coordinator for the Ministry of Education, but when her husband passed away in 1998, she had to take on a more local-based job.
Kesaia was born here and now lives in Lower Hutt. She also has 2 boys and a daughter. Raiata, her daughter, is in the conversation as well. She was 5 months old at the time, so you might hear her squealing a little bit, but she's an angel.
So here's Liliani and Kesaia.
My mum is Liliani Leveni Waite. She's from Tatakomotonga in Tonga, and she lives in Gisborne, New Zealand. Mum worked as an early childhood education coordinator for the Ministry of Education for about 10 years, and then after that she went on to become a Pasifika liaison officer at the EIT Polytechnic here in Gisborne for about 13 years. Now she's retired and enjoys spending time with her grandchildren and tending to her garden. My mum is awesome. Everybody that knows me knows that I love my mum, and they've heard me talk about mum. Living legend.
Kesaia is my only daughter. I got 3 children, and she's the youngest. She named after my mother. She's working for the Ministry of Justice, and she's the principal research analyst of the Waitangi Tribunal. She's proud to be a Tongan, but I'll tell you a little story to that. Katie School is just a school down the road. Most of the kids goes to that school, they are Māori, because this area is mostly Māori people. She goes to school. It was hardly any island people there. And she always said, "Mum, I'm a Māori." And I said, "No, you're a Tongan."
You always said that because I was your only daughter, and it's different having sons than having daughters, because daughters are so precious. Like, you know what you always say, your daughter of the family is like your laipele, or your special kind of. So I always felt like I was precious, and so you wanted to keep me close to you so that you could protect me and raise me to be sort of proper Tongan girl,
And that goes back to how
To your upbringing,
to my upbringing, and also my culture. The Tongan girls, they're so precious. If we go into detail of those, it's quite with our girls, we have to make sure that they stay a virgin and untouched.
Goodness.
Before their wedding day, because that wedding, Tongan wedding for a young man and a young girl, they love, and they are so important in our culture. And because
But that's in a Christian sort of 1950s when you were growing up.
yeah,
For me, I didn't see any of my friends have those same expectations.
yeah,
So I thought it was a bit sort of bit weird
but
and a bit stressful.
yeah.
A very high expectation that I didn't think was realistic or normal.
But actually, it's the way I brought
I
up.
know.
Because I was the oldest girl in the family, and my mother always told me, if the girl is already been with a boy and you already,
Had sex.
yes. And I was protective of that sort of idea.
Yeah.
And that's why I want you,
I thought it was too unrealistic. And I'm not going to do that to my daughter. Because it's sort of, you don't want to disappoint your mother, but at the same time when you're, this is not Tonga, and I know I'm Tongan, but I just want, I want it to be, oh my God, you're ready.
Just undo it, just unplug it. Yeah.
It just,
Yeah, unplug it then.
oh, it's the
That's the one.
it's the phantom radio that just turns on whenever.
Please continue.
Save me! Oh yes.
You cannot write this.
It was amazing. It was not even the only time. Every time we got to a deeply emotional bit, the phone would go off.
ring.
Her diabetic nurse would call. Every time.
In this next section, Liliani and Kesaia discuss expectations around being Tongan women.
I felt like it was hard for me because I wanted to be normal. Like every teenager wants to, and young woman wants to feel confident and normal, and that expectation, I thought it was not realistic. I always felt like I was, no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to disappoint you in that way. In that way of following our culture to be a perfect something. Because I know that you were that perfect girl, but I didn't feel like that was me because I'm here in this country, and it's not the value that this country is held by, and I didn't think it really meant much, and I still think that. So even though now I'm married and I got 3 children, I still didn't hold that value the same as you. That's the one thing I don't regret. I look back and I think, no, it was okay that I didn't listen.
You probably, if you
It was okay.
you'll probably never get married.
Exactly. Because it's such a pastor's daughters. I'm not a pastor's daughter. Poly kids out there, they know when you're a pastor's daughter, you're the fastest daughter to have sex before marriage. But I mean, that's quite controversial, but true. Isn't that right?
It is.
Because you're holding them to an unrealistic standard in this country, even in Tonga maybe. I don't know. I can't speak about Tonga, but I always felt that was like stressful. But I always felt like you were perfect, even when you came here.
Because it's the culture, that's my culture where I was brought up. grew up in that culture, and from my mother, she always talked to me about those kind of things. You know, if I go with a boy or have a boyfriend and you go and have a baby or something like that, that is really putting the family down. Your brothers, your parents, your whole family.
I don't think anybody here really cares that much. Like for me, because I left home 17, gone, there was no community to really disappoint for me. So I didn't sort of worry about that.
It's probably because
But I did
grew
feel
up
bad.
here in New Zealand.
Yeah. I think it's a bit unfair on girls. That double standard.
What happened when you did have pregnant before you getting married? Actually, my heart was broken, and that's why I said to you, you have to get married. Do you remember that day?
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
doesn't matter, you have to marry that person. I was scared that child might grow up with a single mom or with somebody else, and it will break my heart. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like that at all.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the wedding and all that, and I think I told you I was prepared for a big wedding because she's my only daughter, and the family, they were looking forward for that. But when I was talking to you and he said, no, I don't want a big wedding. I just go to the register office and get married, and that's it. And you did exactly what you said.
Something that I thought was interesting when I talked to Kesaia before we did the conversation with her and her mum, she says that she does everything her mum says, which is so different for me, because I don't. But yeah, she said that even when her mum told her she had to get married when she got pregnant, she says it all worked out. Her mum was right.
I mean, they're both really loving and generous with each other, eh? So, which makes it really nice to listen to.
Yeah.
I do feel like some of the things that Liliani said, when I'm hearing them again, I'm like, damn, like it is full on to
pretty
tell
harsh,
your
yeah.
daughter that she needs to marry the person that got her pregnant. And I think that this is like a dichotomy of a lot of immigrant mothers and grandmothers, incredibly kind, loving. I mean, they basically give their whole lives to their children and grandchildren and partners, but at the same time they have these intense, rigid, maybe somewhat regressive Christian values, yeah, or not necessarily Christian, but religion-based values. And it's sort of like, how does that impact your child who has to live in a society that is different to the one you grew up in, has to try and marry those two things? Yeah, I mean, which is what Kesaia talks about.
Yeah, and how does that influence how they maternal or matriarchal themselves, I guess.
Matriarchal themselves? We're just making
words up.
But no, yeah, I understand what you mean.
It's also interesting how Liliani's so against children being raised by single mums when that's literally what she did. Her husband died when Kesaia was only 13, and it wasn't just raising Kesaia, it was raising her brothers, Brian and Anthony. And Brian also has a disability, which meant that for most of his life, Liliani had to be his sole carer all the way until this year when she moved into IHC care.
I think that Liliani probably feels the way she does about Kesaia raising her kids as a single mum, because that's what Liliani had to do. She probably gets how hard it is.
Yeah.
The difference is that mum wasn't a single mum by choice. And to be honest, I was actually a daddy's girl. And I got to the teenage years, and I don't know if you remember, Mum, but I got to those teenage years, and it was really hard because of the pressure, that I knew that you expected of me. It was hard to live up to it with being a teenager. And then I felt like I wasn't that close to you. I don't know if you remember that. I felt like You were always gone. You were busy. You know, always busy, always away from home for whatever reason. And I was more close to Dad.
Yeah, no, that's true. You spent most of your young age with your father.
And then when he died, then I felt like after that, that's when you and I became very close. Hey, we spent all our time together.
Yeah.
You always said you were like the mum and the dad.
Yes, yeah.
But I never thought about that when I was pregnant. I wasn't going to be a single mum because, you know, Curtis was always going to be there. I knew that. He would never leave me to be a solo mother. He always wanted to be together. It was me that wasn't ready. You know? It was... We always wanted to be together. But I just wasn't...
I didn't know that.
I just was sort of not ready to commit to... Because I felt like I was too young. 28. So I knew I would never be a single mother because I had him. And he would never let me be a single mother.
Hey, sweetie. Hey.
Being pregnant forced us to commit to each other rather than sort of, you know, muck around. You know? But I don't regret that. And I'm glad you told us to do that because that's one of the things that makes me happy today. Knowing that I got married to him and we're married. And it's true what you said, you know. I thought, oh, being married, how can that be any different from being in a relationship? But it is. I feel like it is, you know.
I remember that you say that.
So you were right about that.
When I came here, that I was 20. I was just told by my auntie that we're coming to New Zealand. I have got no idea where New Zealand is and why we're coming over here. Because my auntie married to a New Zealander. At that time, I just finished school. And all I thought, oh yeah, well, I'll be going on a plane and I'll, you know, that'd be really good. I'll go overseas. I know there is work here in New Zealand, but I didn't think about that work. I think about, oh yeah, I'll be going over and, you know, like any other kid, I guess, when you're that young, you just want to go and see what's like.
For adventure.
But I remember I arrived here in New Zealand, I arrived here in June. Why I remember that? Because when I came, it was foggy when I arrived, and I never forget it. And I hopped out of the plane. Oh my gosh, it was freezing cold. Coming from a country, it's so warm. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing over in this country over here?
Was it easy to just leave? Like, were you excited? You weren't sort of sad to say bye?
I had no idea. I was told you were going to New Zealand. So I jumped on the plane, came over here. And then my auntie went to work and she said to me, well, you have to go to work. You know, so I went with her to work. And so when I get paid, I never see my money. She always go to auntie. Yeah, I thought I was lucky to go to New Zealand. But when I see that the opportunity there, that is where I sort of wanting to go to work and help my family. I start working in the Green Lane Hospital. It's, what do you call those people? They do cleaning and...
Orderly?
No.
Cleaner?
Cleaner, yes, cleaner.
I tried really hard with orderly there.
Just for context, in the 1970s and the 1960s, this is when more Tongans started arriving in New Zealand. There were short-term contractual agreements between the New Zealand government and Tonga during this time due to demand for labour in New Zealand's industries.
Which was something that obviously got turned around rapidly because in the mid-1970s was when the dawn raids started happening. So I mean, migrants' heads must have been spinning. Do you want us here? Do you not want us here? And that is what you get when your immigration policies are racist.
Anyways.
When Liliani left Tonga, aged 21, she probably didn't realise she wasn't going to return for another 15 years.
I went to Tonga after 5 years. And on our way to Tonga was a big hurricane in Tonga, and we couldn't land it. I was so scared because actually the plane, it was really, and I had the experience of actually flying off my seat up like this and down like that, off the plane. Yeah, that's how bad it was. And it was scared me. And it took me 15 years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Was that when I was a baby? When we went back? No?
No.
We went back before that. Oh. I didn't know that.
And I was so scared to go back. And I thought, no, I'm not going to go back.
What was it like when you went back?
When I went back?
Yeah,
Well,
when you saw everybody.
yeah, when I went back, I was so excited to see my parents, see my brothers, and my family. Because when I came to Gisborne, I didn't talk much in Tongan because there was not many Tongan. In those days, it was hard to ring Tonga, that you can talk to your family. No, you're isolated, And here in Gisborne, Auckland is okay, you got some Tongan people. But over here, it was only a few people here, but we didn't know each other then, But something that I found when I went back to Tonga, I prefer to talk in English. They expect me to speak in Tongan, and I can understand that, because even now, if I talk in Tongan, and some of the things that I couldn't think of the right word, then I have to speak in English. Yeah, when I went home, I bought some flowers and I bought some little things for my grandmother. And when I went back, when I arrived there, and I said, I want to go and see Mele Lopa, that's my grandmother. And my father said, yeah, we can go and see her after. So when we were ready, I went over to my bag and get my little things that I got for her. I think I bought her a dress and a cardigan. And I said, okay, here we go. So we hopped in the car and we drove over to her house. And when we drove over there, I said, where are we going? Because I know exactly where to go, where my grandmother lived. And I said, where are we going? And they said, my brother said, we're going to see Mele. And I said, it's Mele's house over there. And I pointed to where we for us to go. I heard my father was saying, because he was driving, he said, oh my God, she didn't know that she passed away. And they were all quiet. They were quiet over there. I said, what's wrong? What's the matter? Because at the same time, I know that is the road because I saw the cemetery. And I was wondering, why are we going to the cemetery? Mele's house is not at this, on that road. Mele's house is on the other side. And my father said, oh my gosh, we didn't let her know her grandmother passed away. She passed away 2 years. And I didn't know about that. And they said, and Dad said, sorry, but we didn't let you know your grandmother passed away. And I said, why didn't you tell me? No. And they thought that I knew. See, nobody knows that I didn't know and I didn't know. And that's how the communication those days. You know, we live here, we didn't communicate with our families. We didn't hear from our parents. We have to write a letter to let them know what's going on. But that was the story about my grandmother. And I'll tell you something. I still doesn't get it. I still doesn't. I always still think that she's alive. Never come to close that from my mind. I still think that.
Were you angry, or did you hate that you had to live here? Like, do you feel like it was worth it? Because sometimes I feel like it's always, sacrifice. And I always feel sad sometimes because you tell me those stories and I can't imagine, I think about your sacrifice coming here.
Yeah.
And it makes me, it's sad. It's really sad because I can't imagine going to another country and, let's face it, people weren't that friendly all the time to you,
Actually, I don't feel that was a sacrifice. It was meant to be like that. I felt like that. That's the road that I had to travel to get there. It was no regret. I got children, I got grandchildren. You see, that road that I travel, there was nobody knows. So I can't really answer that, to be quite honest. Hey, sweetheart. And I got a beautiful little granddaughter here. So I don't really see the sacrifice there. But where I am now, I don't want to look back. I'm looking forward, and I'm keep on going forward, because looking at the past, it will be sad, very sad. That's why I don't focus at the past, I focus.
I do the opposite. I'm always looking at the past. That's what I do.
No, I
my
look
thing.
forward.
No.
Because if I live in the past, I'll be sad.
Yeah.
I'll look forward and leave those things behind. Keep on going, keep on going. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a bit of a theme just in the series as a whole, this difference between generations, the older generation wanting to move forward from the past and the younger generation actively looking to it.
Yeah, I guess because that parent generation has gone through so much trauma, of course they want to forget about that and just live in the present moment where, because they've worked so hard in the past, they've reached a point where they can enjoy the fruits of their labour. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think our generation, because we're all about looking back in order to redress the wrongs of the past, and that's great. But we shouldn't judge those who can't face that.
Absolutely, because it's for a reason. I also think that we sometimes take this for granted, but what would that generation of women have been if they didn't have to give up so much to make their children and grandchildren's lives something, I don't want to say more because it's not a question of better, but, my gran didn't get to do a job that she was interested in. Her job had to be taking care of her family. And, Liliani says that everything that she did was worth it because of where her family is now, but that's still putting their happiness and their stability on this pedestal, and it's just kind of humbling.
Hearing Liliani talk about her wanting to go back to Tonga and then contrasting that with Kesaia's own experience of going to Tonga is quite interesting. So Liliani sent Kesaia back to Tonga after her last year of high school so Kesaia could gain more insight into what Tongan life is all about.
It was still one of the best times of my life, actually. Like I said before, I felt like a lot of those Tongan rules and things, they were weird. Really weird. And they didn't make sense over here, like they're taken out of context. But when you go and when I went to Tonga and I lived there, and I lived as part of the family in a little village, and, you know, went to church and, you know, did all the things that my cousin did, then I understood all those rules made sense. Because how do I teach my own children those values? Because, you know, like I tell my son, you know, I tell him all the time, oh, you're Tongan, you know, that's why you're so, you know, strong, and that's why you're so, I don't know, you know. Hey.
And he always say that he's a Tongan.
Yeah, he says, oh, come and look at my Tongan dance, Mum. But then I think, oh, how is he going to know what is being a Tongan? Because he thinks that everybody in Gisborne is Tongan, eh? He thinks that this is where all the Tongans live, because this is where you live, and you're the only Tongan that he knows. And her, like, I feel I have more obligation to her to you know, to teach her Tongan culture, because, you know, that's what I have, you know, to full right to.
Are you a little Tongan? No, you're a little Maori.
Well, she's
Are you're Tongan? You're Matematonga? Yeah? Oh, whoa.
you know, I think I'll teach her the values that you taught me, because I think
That's
those,
the one you know.
yeah, and sort of doesn't matter if I can't speak fluent Tongan or the Tongan way. I'll hold her.
All right. You go back to your mum.
I worry that they won't, you know how lots of people grow up and they know they're part something, but they don't know anything about it?
I think if you want to retain your culture, you got to get involved in the community, in the church.
Yeah, but I'm not into that. I'm not into church.
Yeah, because they can't speak fluent the language. But if you take them to church, they
can
learn
hear.
they hear from them, and they also go to Sunday school.
But I feel like that I'm never going to do that, because I can't see myself doing that.
Australia,
That's why I
they do.
wanted us to go for a holiday to Tonga, so that they can, so Monty can say, this is Tonga. This is where everybody is Tongan and everybody's speaking Tongan, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's hard. What if I don't agree with those church ways of life and ways of thinking are not, that's not me? You know, and remember how I said I didn't want to baptise the children, but you said that's our culture, but I said no, that's Christianity. And so we didn't baptise them because we couldn't agree on that. I find that quite hard.
You can't teach your children if you can't speak the language. When you teach a culture to children, they have to get involved. And all those things, it will make sense. Yeah, they're all aware and they all know, oh yeah, that's my mum is a part Tongan and my grandmother is a Tongan. But if they don't get involved with those, then it means
doesn't
nothing.
mean
They'll
anything.
lose it.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah. I think about that sometimes. But I sort of also think, what can I do?
Remember we went to Tonga and you were gonna, what were you gonna do? We went and talked to the school. Remember?
Oh, I was gonna do a I was gonna do a PhD in Tongan history,
Something like that, eh?
and I was gonna go and live in Tonga and learn to speak the language. I thought it would be my chance, because I thought I would learn to be fluent if I lived there for 6 months. I knew I could. I couldn't write about Tongan history if I couldn't even read the documents.
That's right.
Hey.
Yeah.
But that's all gone now. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, I remember you saying, well, if I do all those, I'll be too old to have a family, remember? And you said, I better have a family and then I'll do that later.
Yeah, but now I've got a family.
Yeah.
I'll never do that. I know I'll never do that.
No, you got to feed the family.
Yeah.
It's probably like quite a key thing I'm interested in with this podcast is like how intergenerational relationships work, not only between these parents and kids, but the generation still coming, especially as it can feel sometimes like that culture is being diluted with every generation that's raised in a country or culture that's outside their home culture or ethnic culture. Amongst my peer group or friend group, I feel like there is a tide turning in the last few years maybe where there's been more pride in being Chinese, but the things that we latch onto as markers of Chineseness are like dumplings, red bags, I don't know, not really the Lantern Festival, but mahjong, like they're quite tokenistic. It's like iconography rather than culture, and it doesn't feel like it has depth, but it's like that's the only way we know how to keep that culture, and that those would be what we would pass on to our next generations, you know?
Yeah, but it's so much more diluted than what we got given. But if we can't bring what we were given as children even into our lives, we're never going to be able to pass it on to our kids, are we? Like, you know, how do you even judge the importance of some of these things? Like, they lose their value in a different context.
Totally.
So you don't need to be trained in how to cook for your husband, which is a thing in South Indian culture. If your husband can also cook, you know, like, or if you don't want a husband.
Yeah, part of that thinking is rooted in like culture is this static thing, and that's a Western view of non-Western culture anyway. So,
and also I think not looking at those things as backwards, but looking at them as necessary, you know, like Kesaia is so good at understanding the way that Liliani thinks because it's the way that was more necessary to think. And I like that, accepting that things are necessary in the time, but we can also sometimes let them go.
what do you think about when whakapapa is part of it? Like if you belong to multiple cultures or ethnicities, like do you think that forms part of the, if we're going to call it dilution of culture? Like if Kesaia's kids are a mix of so many different cultures, how do they retain any of them, all of them?
I don't think you can ever retain culture, or I don't think you can ever hold your culture in the same way that the generation before you could, especially if there is migration between those two generations. I think we could try and stop imagining that there's only one way to do this. Like, you can relearn. My mum is 57 and she's learning Sinhalese now. You know, I don't think, obviously there are parts of her culture that she missed out on, but maybe learning it when you're old enough to go and look for it is a really beautiful way of, or really important way of understanding yourself, and maybe it's going to teach you things in that part of your life, you know? I don't think we can pass on culture or pass on
Things in the same way.
I think that's okay.
Growing up, I always thought home is Gisborne. Gisborne is my home. When I went to Tonga, I realised that Tonga is actually my home. Because I'm not from here. Because I remember coming back on the plane from Tonga, flying into Auckland at night time. And when I left to go to Tonga, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm leaving home, I'm going by myself, I'm 15, I'm going to Tonga for a holiday, like an adventure, like a reverse of mum's migration to New Zealand. It's like, I'm just going on an adventure. Oh, I'm so sad, I'm leaving home. Oh my gosh, it's going to be scary. But when I left Tonga and flew back into Auckland, I thought, I've left home. And I realised I was a foreigner. I'm a foreigner in this country, and so are you. And that's when I realised that Tonga is my home, not New Zealand. I live here, but I don't really, I could live anywhere.
See, her
But Tonga's my
now,
home.
I can see
Tonga's my
that
home.
we connected. We connected that way of
Oh, me and you connected.
yeah, we connected that way because yeah, you know, because
That's how I felt.
because that's how
Is
I
that how you
felt.
feel?
Yeah, that's exactly how
That's
I felt.
how I
That's
felt when I
why
was
I said
15.
to you,
Yeah.
I never want to
Yeah.
apply for a citizen in New
Yeah.
Zealand because this is how I felt.
That's how I feel. I
No,
feel
I
like
never know that.
when I left Tonga, even though I was born in New Zealand, I left Tonga. I left home. You know, that was my Tonga is my homeland. Not here because we're not from here.
But I remember when you first came back from Tonga, when you came, you were crying. Remember that?
And I still feel that.
Yeah, you're crying
I
when you
still feel it.
came.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I love living in New Zealand, but I don't feel the same feeling
yeah,
as when I
and
left
me too.
Tonga.
I felt the same.
I felt like this is where my blood comes from. Or my other half, that's a different story. My dad's side, that's a different story. But my Tongan side, that's my home there. I'm here as like a migrant too. I just happen to be born here. I feel it's kind of weird. Like it's kind of difficult growing up, like in Gisborne in particular, because there's a real predominant culture here, and that's the Māori culture. Me and my brother have similar experience and similar feeling about being, because we're mixed, we're Tongan and we're Pākehā or Palangi, and we were brought up in a Māori community. And it's, we know our Tongan culture, but we're more around Māori culture, and that's more normal for us in many situations. So that's like an extra layer.
Yeah.
Anson and I talked about it. He said, same as me, all our friends are Māori, and we feel most comfortable in our social setting when we're amongst Māori, because that's what we know. When we go to our Tongan people, we feel Palangi, we're so white. When we go and hang out with our Palangi friends, we feel we're black. So we feel everywhere we go, we have that little part of us that in our mind telling us that you feel awkward, But I got used to it. I'm used to it now.
How do you really feel like, because you're living in
a
those
Tongan
two
girl.
cultures?
I'm a Tongan girl because when I had my baby and I looked at her and I said, I'm a Tongan girl. I'll teach you what my mum taught me about being a Tongan girl. And that was it. That's all I could think of. I didn't think of anything else. Like, I wanted her to know those things that you taught me, those Tongan values. Even though I can't speak Tongan, I'll learn something, I'll teach her something.
That's good.
Yeah.
Are you crying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't you think this is so special? Like the moment that Kesaia looked at Raita and the first thought she had in her brain, like that's a moment that's never going to happen again. That's like so precious.
I just love the pride that Kesaia has in her Tonganness. Like, I feel like that's the place I want to get to.
For yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if it's possible, but that's like amazing.
Yeah, and understanding it, being proud of it, wanting to pass what her mum passed to her daughter. That's a really full view
That's
of
Liliani's
it.
legacy. That's what she's passing on.
That is a hella legacy.
So we want to end the episode saying the biggest thank you to Liliani and Kesaia.
And Raita, please go on our Instagram and check out pictures of her, because she is a fat, beautiful, perfect baby with amazing hair that defies gravity. Yeah,
A baby with a mohawk.
You can check out photos and videos of all our participants on Instagram at Convos with My, on Facebook at Where Are You From Really, and on RNZ's website. Conversations with My Immigrant Parents was created, produced and directed by Julie Zhu and Saray De Silva. Recorded by Joey Siasoko, sound engineered by Colleen Brennan, with original music by Tal. Our cover illustration is by Ngaumutane Jones at Ms. Mimo, with design by Sonia Milford.
RNZ supervising producers are Sarah Vuitalitu and Justin Gregory. RNZ Senior Commissioner on this project is Kay Almers. Conversations with My Immigrant Parents was made possible by the RNZ NZ On Air Innovation Fund. He kōnei ipurangi tēnei mo te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.